Hello everyone, I'm Varlakshmi. I'm currently pursuing my BTech in Vishnu Institute of Technology, Bhimavaram. Today I'm going to discuss about closures. Closure is a powerful topic in JavaScript. A closure is a feature in JavaScript where inner function has access to the outer function's variable even after the outer function is finished its execution. This is because the inner function remembers the values of the outer function and uses them in the inside this function. Let's take an example to understand this topic. Here, the outer function takes the parameter outer variable and returns the inner function. When the outer function is executed, it returns the inner function, which still remembers the values of the outer variable. Even after the outer function finishes its execution, the inner function holds on to the outer variable because of the closure. Then this code returns the outside and inside as an output. Let's run this code and understand how the output is. Let's run this code. Then in terminal, type node space closure.js. Then enter. This code will output outside and inside as output. Let's take another example to understand how closure is implemented. Let's write a function called create counter. Then inside the create counter, let's declare a variable called counter, which is a private inside the create counter function. Next, this returns a function which increments the counter variable. Then returns the count. This function returns the count. Then outside this function, let's create a variable counter which calls the create counter function. Then write a console.log, then call this counter, then repeat it 3 times. This create counter function returns a function inside the create counter. Then this inner function increments the create counter inside this function and returns the count. Here, the count variable is not accessed from outside, but due to closure, the inner function can access the variable from outside the function. Here, the count is the part of the closure, and when we call this function second time, it remembers the value and uses that value in the function. For the first console count, this increments the count to 1, and for the second call, it remembers the previous value and increments it and returns the value that is 2. And this is repeated for all the calls for this function. Let's run this code and see the output. For this node.closures.js, let's run this command and see the output. The output is 1, 2, 3. Now let's discuss other topics which makes functions asynchronous. The functions uses callbacks functions to run asynchronously. These callback functions are most helpful for asynchronous functions. The callback function is simply a function passed as an argument to the another function, which is then executed after the operation is completed. So this is the most basic way to handle asynchronous tasks. Now let's see an example to understand this callbacks. Here this get data function is uses a function set timeout, and this consoles the data fetched. Then a callback function is called inside this function. Then get data after data simulates the fetching data with a set timeout. After 2 seconds, it logs the data fetched, then calls the callback function. Here, the callback function ensures that data process runs only after the data has been fetched. When to use callbacks? Callbacks are great for simple asynchronous tasks, but they can lead to callback hell when you have multiple asynchronous operations that depend on each other. In those cases, the code can become deeply nested and hard to read. Now, let's run this code and understand the output. To run this code, type node space callbacks.js, then it outputs data fetch, then the processing data is outputted. Now let's understand another topic called promises. A promise is an object that represents the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation. Promises provide a cleaner and more structured way to handle asynchronous operation compared to callbacks. A promise can be one of the three states: pending, the operation, that means the operation is still in the progress, or fulfilled, that means the operation is completed successfully, or rejected, that means the operation is failed. Now, in this example, we implemented promises to understand. Here, the fetch data returns a promise. Inside this promise, there is a timeout that simulates the asynchronous task. If the operation is successful, the promise is resolved with a success message, which is handled by dot then function. Then, if it is false, the promise is rejected and the error is caught by dot catch function. When to use promises? Promises are useful when you need to handle multiple asynchronous tasks in a more readable way. You can chain the dot then function methods to handle the sequential operations without deeply nesting the callbacks. Here, the fetch data when the fetch data is successfully run, it returns the data fetched successfully, or if there is an error or the function fails, then it then error is catched by catch function and error is returned. Let's run this example. No, let's type node space promise.js, then it returns data fetched successfully. Let's discuss some more topics for asynchronous or await. Asynchronous or await is built on top of promises and provides an even cleaner and more readable way to handle asynchronous operations. It allows you to write asynchronous code as if it is asynchronous, making it easier to understand. This asynchronous await are used for asynchronous functions to handle more tasks to be run simultaneously. Here, the get data function is marked with asynchronous, which means it can use await keyword. Await keyword pauses the function until the promise returned by the fetch data is resolved or rejected. If the promise is resolved, it logs the success message. If the message is rejected, the catch block handles the error. When to use async or await? We use async or await when we want clean and readable code that handles the asynchronous task in more sequential manner. So it's perfect for avoiding nested dot then chain, then makes the error handle easier with try and catch blocks. Here, callbacks and promises await are completed, then asynchronous and await are used along with the promises. Let's run this code and see what is the output. The output will be data fetched successfully. Here, the callbacks closures are used in for asynchronous functions. These are all interrelated. For this, uh, let's run this code and see the output. Here, to run this, type node space asynchronous.js to run this code. The output is will be data fetched successfully. Here, asynchronous is used for when we want clean and readable code. This gives the readability for our code. Now let's create a to-do list using the following concepts and understand how it works. First, we are going to implement to-do list using the closures. Most of the to-do list is implemented using closures. Let's understand how we are using in the code. First, we need to keep our to-do list private while the functions need to interact with the list. Then we create a function called to-do list. Inside this function we have variable all that stores our list of to-dos because it's inside the to-do list function. It's private. That means no one from the outside can directly access or modify it. This is the power of the closures. Only the function we return will be able to access all variables. Then the add function is responsible for adding a new to-do item to our list. We pass in a to-do item object that contains things like title or due date, and this function pushes it to the all array. With closures, add has access to all array even though it is defined outside this function. Then this function mark as complete allows you to mark a to-do item as completed by modifying its completed status. Again, it has access to all array through the closure, so it can modify the status of an array item in the list. So let's see how we handle different types of to-dos based on their due dates. If uh, if it is an overdue, that means when we want to do an task and we have not completed the task, then this function checks if the each to do item to see if the due date is before today. If it is, we consider it is overdue. The item is compared with the due date before today. Then if we say due is today, due today function calculates the due date and compares with the today today with the due date. This function filters to-dos that are due exactly today. Then due later. This function calculates the due later. That means if the due is not today, then it will be postponed. Displaying the displayable to-do list is a function that formats the list of to-dos into the nice string format so that we can display. For each item, it checks if the due today or hides the date if it is, or it adds a checkbox that means cross mark for completed tasks. A tick for incomplete before that item. Finally, it joins all the formatted to-do items into a single string that can be printed. For todo.add adds the to-do items to our all array. We can add using add function. Here, based on the current date, the program prints the overdue, due today, and due tasks in the format. Here we use a closure to keep the list of to-dos as private, and we built helper functions like add, mark as, and overdue, due today, and due later to manage the list. When we add in task, it checks whether the due is today or overdue or due later. If the due is today, it reminds us. Then, if the task is completed, it marks them as completed. Or if they are not completed, it calculates their due. So this can way we can implement to-do list using closures. Here all these functions are implemented to check the functionality of the to-do list. So we can use this to manage our tasks, etc. Here the closures are used only to make the variables access to the only inside the functions, not the outside the function, because it so closures gives the variables private. That means they makes them private, so they cannot be accessed outside the function. They can be accessed only inside the functions, or can be accessed by the functions which was written by this function. So I hope this explanation helps you understand how closures works in practice. Today we discussed about closures, callbacks, asynchronous await. Then we understand how to implement to-do lists using closures. So we can say conclude this today. Thank you.